Hello and welcome everyone. I'm your host Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy, your cosmic bro, here to understand what is happening with the Earth energetically. So we look at what's happened on Earth and what is happening with the Earth. So this is earthquakes, volcanoes, geomagnetic storms like we are in right now. Also severe weather and, well, all these shenanigans that occurred earlier in the 20th century, also 21st century, and probably still happening right now. So we're going to talk about a lot today. We're going to start with the current space weather and Earth energetic conditions, the geophysical conditions, and that's because we've had a big magnitude 6.5 earthquake off the coast of Mexico near Acapulco, and that is a city of 1 million people. That's a pretty big earthquake, and in fact, that was forecasted about 2-3 days in advance by yours truly. I'll show you the receipts for that and talk about how I was able to forecast that earthquake. This is like a rough forecast, but we got it. We nailed it. So pretty cool stuff. Thankfully, it doesn't seem anyone was injured in Mexico from that and no big damage. So that's a good thing too. That's what we were hoping for with these sort of large magnitude earthquakes. We could have more of those coming because we are in solar wind conditions that allow for these higher magnitude earthquakes to occur more frequently. We've been talking about that a lot on the channel. Today's video is not going to be on that, but we'll touch on it lightly. And we'll go into the current geomagnetic storm that we're in. We're in a G1 geomagnetic storm. It goes from scale rating of 1 to 5. This is likely to increase to G2, maybe even G3 conditions because we're not even at the main phase of the storm yet. I don't think the big shock wave has hit us yet from this right here. You can see that we had a big 7.1 M-class fire in the sun a couple days ago, and that is due to hit us very soon. And I think that's going to raise us up to G2, G3. So we're already at G1 levels. And we'll talk about, just in general, a few other things there. And then we're going to get into this secret that mainstream science is basically one of the biggest lies ever told, that mainstream science will not acknowledge. Or if they do, they'll gaslight you on it. And that is nuclear testing. Because the more you research into this and the more that you just qualitatively think about this, the more you realize that what we did with nuclear testing back in 1940, 50, 60, 70, all the way up to the modern day, and how many of them did they explode that they haven't told us, so aka covert testing, how much has that affected our planet? It's a big question, a pretty big unknown, but we're not completely clueless because we do have some data sets that we can look at, which, well, let's just say it's pretty incredible. And it shows that there's a tremendous connection between all of these things that we talk about. What's happening with the Earth, earthquakes, geomagnetic storms, and these guys right here. So at the end of that, part 3, we will do a viewer question and answer. So if you have a question, you can ask it in the chat at that time. I'll take some from the general chat, and then I'll also answer any questions attached to a super thanks because those appear in a separate list for me so I can answer them at any time, and they stay there. So you can ask that question at any time and it will get answered. The sooner you ask it, the sooner you'll get it answered in the Q&A, but I will go through all of them. So watch part 1 on the current energetic conditions so you can better understand what I'm talking about when we look through the historic record, and then some loose ends I'm sure will get cleared up during the Q&A, and also maybe some new questions will get opened up for you. So today is going to be an exciting video. Let us get right into it. We're going to start off with an explosion much bigger than what we just saw with that archival footage of the nuclear test. This was a massive plasma filament that blasted off the sun yesterday. So check that out. I mean, that is really something. That is not Earth directed. And when I saw that, I was like, thank God it's not Earth directed, because that looks like a whip. And that would certainly, if that was perfectly aimed at the Earth, be a pretty big deal. We're talking a significant geomagnetic storm from that. Thankfully, it's not Earth directed. It's off to the side. But in general, When these sort of energetic events occur on the sun, they affect the entire energy of the solar system. There's other effects to this beyond just the plasma flux rope that got blasted off. There's also ultraviolet and extreme ultraviolet light that's produced. You have radio frequencies in the radio to microwave bands. You have neutrino flux. So people are able to feel these things. We're able to detect them scientifically. And when the sun is just more active in general, so is the entire energetic field of the solar system. So we had that yesterday. You notice that these big sunspots are Earth center direct 24 hours ago, a little bit more than 24 hours ago actually. Now it's about 36 hours ago at this time. So they're still right here in this zone. We'll look at our latest solar imagery in just a little bit, but this is the biggest event to have occurred on the sun just in the past 48 hours. Though we do have this halo coronal mass ejection coming in. So it's a partial halo, most of it going off there, kind of like that. But we do have an impact expected from that. Here is the model according to NOAA. And we see this big spike in the plasma density right here, beginning of the 3rd January universal time. So right now, as we're doing the video, that's what they show. This is the top-down view. Here we see the south-north view. Looks like a pretty surefire shot with this high-density lobe. We see also this other solar storm shock wave, not that strong at the beginning before it, but there's one and then two main zones. It looks like we get hit pretty squarely, according to the model by NOAA. From that 7.1 M-class flare. So we are waiting on that. But let's talk about, before we go more into the solar storm stuff, because we are in a G1 storm now, I want to cover the bigger news, which is the 6.5 magnitude earthquake off the coast of Mexico, because that was a big shaker, one of the biggest earthquakes that we've had in the past couple weeks or more. So here is our latest earthquakes map according to the this is from the USGS, and you'll see a few interesting things here. First off, let's punch in. Here we have our 6.5. Actually, it wasn't off the coast. I thought it was off the coast just a little bit. It was on land. This is a land-based earthquake. That's interesting. 6.5, yellow pager, and then here we have Acapulco, which is a very romantic sounding place. I've heard of it before and I kind of want to go there. I've been nearby. I've been to Mazunte and Zipolitia and near Puerto Escondido, but I haven't been to Acapulco. Anyways, 6.5 earthquake at a depth of 35 kilometers, and then we see this triangle formation around it, 4.5, 4.5, 4.2. Those are aftershocks. We can expect a magnitude 5 aftershock at least from a 6.5. It's unlikely it's just going to get dissipated with these 4.5s because of the way earthquake energy scales. From a 4.5 to a 6.5, it's like 100 times more energy. And typically the magnitude aftershock, the strongest one, will be a tenth the energy. So we're looking at probably a 5.5 aftershock coming in. Now what's interesting about this is that I effectively forecasted that there was a higher likelihood of there being a significant earthquake for Mexico for the next couple of days, and this was a couple of days back. And well, we had it. So how did I do that? So let's look at my Twitter here, and here's my post. I'm showing you this so you can understand how this works and you can apply this yourself, okay? So here's December 29th, 2025, and we see two earthquakes there along the mid-Indian ridge. This is a spreading center between the Antarctic and Australasian plate. And this is a 4.9 and a magnitude 5 earthquake. And just the two of them there back to back, I was like, hey, that's kind of interesting, okay? Well, that's not it. But before we get to the next tweet that I did, you'll see that I said a magnitude 5 plus jolt is possible near the antipodal zone. At that moment in time, there was only magnitude 4.9 and magnitude 5. And I identified the antipodal zone being Mexicali, which is right on the Mexico-US border, but it is Mexicali, Mexico, because they get big earthquakes there. But you'll notice that this is a bit of a range, right? The antipodal zone, first off, it doesn't always hit exactly antipode. Sometimes it's like off by like a few degrees. That's fine. It's still an antipodal quake. And also, again, because these two earthquakes here, you see there's a zone. Well, let's check out the next post. But you clearly see earthquake possible and the antipodal zone because of that activity. It's a bit anomalous. Mid-ocean ridges don't often get magnitude 6 earthquakes. And well, look, that's what happened following up. So here we see a magnitude 6 on the first, a few hours after what happened with these two, and you see that it shifted further down here, which makes it more likely to hit around that location in Mexico that it did. So now that you have a magnitude 6 there, the forecast would be that there could be a potential magnitude 6 plus antipodal quake. Antipode being the opposite side of the globe. So let me show you that very clearly. Here we have our application, which really nicely shows, just draws a line straight through. And I put in Acapulco, Mexico, and we see the antipode location. And look at where it lines up. It lines up right there. So you can look at this pretty simply as there being Australia, Madagascar, and India, okay? So you draw like a line between all three of those, and you get this antipode location. Remember that? Let's go back now to the USGS map. Here we have it, and we see, if we go to our 7-day view, we'll see these earthquakes. So we'll close this out. Okay, so here is that location. The antipode for the 6.5 Mexico is right here in between Australia, Madagascar, and India, right there. Well, this is our zone. So it's basically perfect antipodal sequence. We had the 4.9, and then it moved further south. We had the magnitude 5, then we had the magnitude 6, and then we had the magnitude 6.5 right here in Mexico. So that is pretty incredible. It shows that there are vertical stress dynamics that exist within the Earth that seem to go beyond or like through the core somehow. Like there's some very interesting dynamics here. Maybe rotational. I don't exactly know. Here we see the shaking from that. So we can check this out. This is a webcam view of the shaking as that earthquake came in. Again, magnitude 6.5, depth 35 kilometers. So pretty big earthquake. Thankfully not bigger, but definitely a big earthquake. And we are right now in conditions that could get bigger and bigger. Now, what's interesting about this? What is interesting about this? And just a quick note before moving on is that earthquakes have very similar resonance signatures to nuclear test. So keep that in mind, okay? Because we're going to talk about the nuclear testing for part 2 of this video. Well, earthquakes and nuclear tests have very similar waveform signatures to them, meaning that they're very similar vibrationally, which is interesting. We may perhaps be having like nuclear type explosions on the ground with these earthquakes. I mean, the biggest earthquakes release a lot more energy than nuclear bombs. So there's something crazy happening down there. We don't know. But the fact that they're so similar in their vibratory qualities tells you that there is a certain resonance between them. Because if they're similar in frequency and energy and all this, then there's a resonance. So we'll talk about that more in part 2, but I wanted to clue you in on that. Now, if we go over here to our real-time solar wind, you'll see that we just had 6 hours of G1 geomagnetic storming, and it's likely we are going to get more. So here we see the increase in our geomagnetic volatility. This is our 7-day view. You see our solar wind was effectively normal. This is our magnetic field up top. We have our solar wind density, velocity, temperature, and magnetic field. This is our phi angle. And we see that we started to get more volatile here. And as it started to get choppy, our volatility started to increase. We also had the solar wind velocity go up. The density has been low. So we're in that low density solar wind, which usually seems to trigger these high magnitude earthquakes. And we also have this planetary alignment that's active right now. I've been talking about that. We have Mars and Venus on the other side of the sun, conjunct with the sun right now, as we have Earth and then also Jupiter in a line. And Mercury's in this as well on the Venus-Mars side. So we have some pretty significant planetary geometry active right now. But we've had 6 hours of geomagnetic volatility. What does that mean? Earth has a magnetic field. And let's see if I can pull up a graphic for you showing you this magnetic field, because this is an important point to go over. Actually, I have a nice visualization here that will help you to understand what I'm talking about. So let me pull this up. Okay, Earth's magnetic field. Earth's magnetic field resembles the field of a large dipole bar magnet placed near its center. Earth's field is more complex, though, and it has numerous higher order poles and large-scale anomalous features. The size, shape, and strength of Earth's magnetic field changes across space and all time scales, going from seconds to eons. So a large dipole bar magnet. Everyone's played with magnets. You know that one side will attract things. Both sides will attract if it's just metal. But if you have two magnets, one side will attract the other, whereas the other side will push it away. So there's this force field of attraction and repulsion. Okay, north, south pole, positive, negative. Well, you can look at Earth's magnetic field. It has these field lines flowing into the northern hemisphere, flowing out of the southern hemisphere. This magnetic field is generated due to the turbulent flow of the liquid core of the planet. So there's a part of the Earth that's liquid, right? It's very high pressure and temperature, but it's liquid. So that's pretty interesting because when a large earthquake occurs, the S waves, the shear waves, they travel through solids, but the moment they hit liquids, they don't travel through them anymore. Liquids don't allow shear waves to travel through. So it just basically goes straight through, and then the shear waves drop off when they hit the liquid outer core, which is how we know that there is an outer core. And then we get them pick up again in the inner core. So this is Earth's magnetic field, and we see it stretching out over here as well with the magnetotail, because the solar wind compresses it on the sunward side and then elongates it out like this. And there's a whole bunch of plasma within Earth's magnetic field. So you have this highly vibrational matter, the fourth state of matter, which is made up of charged ions and so much more beyond our understanding, that exist in Earth's plasmasphere, which is contained within the magnetic field. In fact, plasma goes all the way down to the surface and beyond. Deeper into the core, there's plasma, the mantle, all this stuff. During high magnitude earthquakes, we often, land-based ones specifically, we often see earthquake lights. So these bursts of plasma come up from the ground, and they'll be like blue or green colors, and they go straight up to space. We have quite a bit of footage of that in New Zealand, Japan, and more. If this magnitude 6.5 earthquake in Mexico, because that was a land-based earthquake, if that had occurred at night, we probably would have captured some earthquake light footage, but alas, we didn't. It happened in the morning. Earth's magnetic field is this field of force. It's very important. When you have a geomagnetic storm, there are compressional changes to it, right? It's like vibrating and oscillating. And what that means is that the force field is changing. So now all that plasma is flowing differently around the globe. You have plasma that's instead funneled down towards the surface. It creates the aurora. And there's a whole bunch of other geophysical changes that unfold. You have telluric currents that are generated. These are electric currents that flow through the surface of the Earth, the crust, and deeper into the mantle. As you go deeper into the Earth, the conductivity increases. So you have this interesting situation where the outer edge of the Earth, the ionosphere, is highly charged, about 10 to the negative 7 Siemens in conductivity, S-E-I-M-E-N-S, just like the German company. Then the atmosphere is about 10 to the negative 14 Siemens, so 7 orders of magnitude more resistive. And then Earth's surface is in general about 10 to the negative 7, 10 to the negative 6, 10 to the negative 5 in terms of its conductivity in Siemens. As you go deeper down, that only increases. So Earth is very electrically conductive as you get deeper down. The oceans are very electrically conductive because they're filled with a bunch of salt, right? Those dissociate and create free ions floating around. conductivity of seawater is like, I think, 2 or 3 Siemens, so 7 orders of magnitude more than rock, but in general, it's all relative. So rock compared to the atmosphere is very conductive. As you go further down, it increases. So when you have these fluctuations occurring with Earth's magnetic field and it's generated from the core, those fluctuations are able to go all the way down to the core. How much and how significant is a good question, but you have a changing force field, and as it gets deeper and deeper in the Earth, you are having it interact with layers that are more and more electrically conductive. And what that does is it generates electric currents, because a time alternating magnetic field will generate time alternating currents of the same frequency. And so what does a stronger electric current passing over 35 kilometers at depth over a fault do? Maybe it can trigger an earthquake. Interesting to consider. We don't exactly know, but we have a lot of observational data. We wish we had a lot more. We wish we had 10,000 years. We don't. But we do have a good amount of observational data that suggests that there is a profound connection between all these things. And you just have to open up your eyes just a little bit to see it, right? If you're like this, you're not going to see. You got to widen them up. Wake up, folks. So here we have our 10-day view of geomagnetic activity. And this is showing us our geomagnetic storm. I'll just punch in for you guys. It's very minor right now, but I think it's going to increase. So this is basically just like quiet levels, then going to active levels, and now we're at these G1 levels. So we just hit G1. We'll see how long it stays at G1. It may die off and kind of cool off before we get hit by that solar storm. But we know it's coming in. We see that right here with our ACE data. And this is our low energy protons and electrons. So when you have these big explosions on the sun, it'll actually accelerate some of these particles near the sun or even in interplanetary space to then speed up and increase in density as they hit Earth. So we see that. Back on the 29th is when we had that explosion. We see that 7.1 M-class flare. It went up, and then now we saw them just quickly ramp up there. That was also from an Earth Direct C-class flare. I think we probably actually have a new space weather model by NOAA, but they will ramp up and up and up until the impact comes in, because they're being accelerated at the front of that plasma shock wave, and then they'll drop. So the fact that they've ramped up and they haven't just done this precipitous drop right back down to baseline tells you that we're about to get hit by a big solar storm. And NOAA probably has a new model because there was a Earth Direct explosion. Boom, we do. All right, so here's the new space weather model by NOAA. There was like a C-class flare, high C-class flare that actually was pretty eruptive. So here we see the first one, and there's the second one. So we have two waves coming in. It looks like they reduced the severity of the first one, but the second one's also looking pretty significant. And look at the plasma velocity going up. So this is coming in a little bit later now on the 3rd as well, universal time. That looks like about noon. So the latest model is showing noon universal, and that makes sense because right now it is, get my cursor, it is 2:41 a.m. universal time. So in about 10 hours, they show this impact coming in with their latest model, and then the second wave will follow up right behind it. Okay, so that's important because we're already at G1 levels. And if the magnetic field is already more volatile and then you have a big solar storm impact come in, it will increase the volatility even beyond that. So their forecast is for a G1, G2 from that. Maybe it's been updated just in the past few hours. We can check. But their forecast is for a G1, G2. I wouldn't be surprised if you see G3 at the end of this because of how this is kind of building up. So let's see if it's right here. Yeah, so they're predicting G1, G2 geomagnetic storming from this. But again, I just wouldn't be surprised if you see G3. I'm not sure I'd put it at 50% probability. I would say it's more than 25%, but less than 50% that we see G3. I just wouldn't be surprised by it. This isn't like, oh, it's a 2% chance, and if we hit G3 levels, which is strong geomagnetic storming, to be like, oh my God. Like, no, come on, folks. We have this planetary alignment right now that's active. Actually, no, I probably think G3 is probably like a 50% chance because of that. We have this alignment between the planets. Let me show you that really quick. I've shown you guys a bunch, but let me just briefly show you this alignment for anyone that is new. If you are, hello and welcome. I'm your host, Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy, cosmic bro. Here are the planets today, right now, and we see Mars, Venus, Mercury, Earth, and Jupiter in a line. This is not common. Last time we had this alignment right here was in 1936. We see it goes more exact on the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th of January. At the same time, Saturn and Neptune are conjunct a once every 36-year cycle, and we have Pluto and Uranus in 60-degree aspects to them, 120 degrees to each other. This is a very rare planetary geometry. I'm not going to be surprised if we get a big earthquake coming up during this. I'm talking like mega quake. I'm not going to be surprised. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed to happen or anything, but I just simply wouldn't be surprised, because this is the sort of planetary geometry you get before really high magnitude earthquakes. So we hope that doesn't occur, but if it does, I've been ringing the bell. I've been telling you guys. So we'll just have to wait and see. Here we can see the magnetic field fluctuations so far from this G1 storm. We'll give this a watch, and then we'll go into the biggest lie that has ever been told. Probably the biggest lie ever told. I mean, maybe there's bigger ones, but as it relates to actual implications for the Earth, which is all life on the planet, probably the biggest lie ever told. Once you start getting to the planetary scale, the stellar scale, the interstellar scale, the mundane human matters start to not matter too much, right? I mean, central banks are a lie, and the Rothschilds and everything, that's a whole bunch of nonsense there, but those are all mundane matters compared to the actual planet and the sun and more. So here we see these magnetic field fluctuations. They have cooled off. They were stronger a few hours ago, but they are still elevated. See, we see some pulses of activity there. So when that storm does come in, we are already activated. As you can see, I think it's going to hit us a little harder than it would otherwise. So yes, that is this is happening right now. These fluctuations interact with our biology. They interact with the Earth in a whole bunch of different ways beyond what's been discussed just in this video and even on this channel. We've been talking about this for years now, but it is beyond our understanding in many aspects. And so you have to keep an open mind with this and realize that if we see this effect, and this effect, for example, often with solar activity and earthquakes, there's this connection, right? If we see that happening, then think of all the things that we're not even aware of that are also happening in the background, because we don't know everything. So that's kind of the higher level perspective that I have and I recommend you take. So now let us talk about something that's been happening with the Earth. So what is the biggest lie that's ever been told? The greatest deception, like knowingly or unknowingly? I don't really know, but there is something that has happened this past 100 years, has never happened before on the planet as far as we know, and it's basically never talked about. So the wool is pulled firmly over people's eyes. There's a lot of things that everyone knows is fake or deceptions or lies, whatever. Almost no one knows about this. And this is one of the biggest things that's ever happened. So here we're looking at sunspot cycles and the annual number of magnetic storms. This is interesting. It goes back to 1865, and we have our data going up to 2015. You'll notice, before I turn myself off, we see here our sunspot count, okay? So this is our smooth sunspot number going from 0 to 200. And then we see our number of geomagnetic storms here per year going up to 75. All right. So I'm going to turn myself off. And you will see that back at the turn of the century, so end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, our solar cycles were very regular and consistent. They were all a little under average, but it wasn't like a grand solar minimum or anything. We definitely had solar activity. We had storms. We see them right here. We had a fairly strong cycle there. with solar cycle 11, it reaching numbers of about 140 on the smooth count. But you notice that back here with these solar cycles them being less, we had less geomagnetic storms. Then starting with solar cycle 17 going through 19 all the way up to the present moment, this does not show solar cycle 25. That all of a sudden the number of geomagnetic storms started really going up, like dramatically going up. So you see that it really started to ramp up, and this is like the early 30s, but really going crazy here in the late 40s to early 60s. Check that out. And then we also had a ton of activity here in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then solar cycle 24, the last one, we saw that there was this big drop off both in sunspots, solar activity, and also with these geomagnetic storms. Well, let us look at a different plot, and this is of earthquake activity. Here we see that this is global seismic energy release and major earthquake counts going from 1900 to 2025. And this is measured in gigawatt hours with a logarithmic scale. And here we see the frequency for magnitude 7.5 or greater earthquakes, and also magnitude 8 or greater earthquakes. You see right off the bat, 5 years with these stars. These are the 5 years with this record going from 1900 to 2025 where magnitude 9 plus earthquakes have occurred. So we have 1952, that was 9.0 Kamchatka, 1960, 9.5 South America, this is like Chile, Peru. 1964, that's Alaska. 2004, Sumatra. 2011, that is Japan. This is 9.0, that's a 9.1. If you notice, you see 1906 is a very strong year. There was a bunch of magnitude 8 earthquakes, a ton of magnitude 7s. You see that, again, this is seismic energy release in a logarithmic scale. So though there were a ton of magnitude 7 and 8 quakes here, these magnitude 9s are just a tremendous amount of energy, such that they eclipse all the other dates except 1906 and this year, 2025. 2010 was also a big year, but 2025 is slightly more. So only 6 years were greater in this data set for earthquake activity than 2025. And in fact, if I add the most recent data in, it may even nudge up a little bit over that. But I think it's still number 7 on this list. But you'll notice that a lot of earthquake activity and seismic energy release occurred, guess what, from 1950 to 1970. Right here, 1952, 1960, 1964, right? We looked at the geomagnetic storm plot earlier, and we saw that data. Let us quickly look at Omni Calculator to show you how much energy a magnitude 9.5 earthquake is in terms of nuclear bombs. So you can get a sense of just how powerful this is. Remember, they have that resonance together. Their vibratory characteristics are very similar. The waveforms that we pick up from a nuclear blast and also from an earthquake are similar. Earthquake lights are plasma. We know that the moment there's a nuclear explosion, there's plasma. I'm going to talk about it more, okay? But we go here, we're going to type in magnitude 9.5, and that is equivalent to 47 Tsar bombs, the largest ever nuclear bomb dropped by the Russians. I think that was in 62. I could be wrong on the date though, but I think that was 1962. It was right in that time frame. Okay, so 9.5 is tremendously huge. And 9.0 is still almost 10 times bigger in terms of energy release than a Tsar bomb. And that was like an eclipse type nuclear test, like so much bigger than the others. It's incredible. I mean, we see the difference here between Hiroshima and Nagasaki, those nuclear bombs, and the Tsar bomb. I mean, this is tens of thousands, and that's just single digits right there. So these earthquakes are really, really powerful. Here we have our nuclear weapon tests per year. We have this data. Now we don't have, if there have been covert nuclear weapons tests, which I personally think there has been, I don't think they just stopped. I think there has been covert testing, but I don't have necessarily proof for that. I just think geopolitically, it makes no sense to take your best weapons, which control the geopolitical order of the globe, and not test them out for 50 years, right? So take that for you. It's just logic. Logic, bro. But I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But here we see our nuclear weapons tests per year. Look at this, ramping up in the late 40s, and look how it just went exponential there in the 50s and 60s, okay? This right here is 1962. Then we have 79 tests by Russia and 96 by the United States, one by France. This is mostly US and Russia. As you can see, Russia's there in red, the United States is in blue. The Americans really fucked it up, and the Soviets as well, basically. To put it simply, we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, I wasn't around at that point. I don't take any responsibility for this, but in general, it was a problem. Then you see that other countries started doing testing more often. For example, a lot by France in the 80s because others were catching up. And then the only test so supposedly recently has been North Korea, going up to 2017. This data goes to 2023. But if we go back to our seismic data, let me show you that. Okay, 1960, 1964, the biggest earthquakes ever to have occurred were clustered right in that biggest spike of nuclear test. Coincidence? I don't know. Now, as based off of our record, these magnitude 9s, 9.0, 9.1, don't appear to line up with any significant nuclear testing like occurred here, unless you count North Korea. It is interesting that North Korea is near Japan and also near Indonesia, where those two magnitude 9s occurred, and they're detonating them underground. Just thought of that. That's interesting. But the 9.5 in South America, 9.0 in Alaska is right during this time frame. Is that just a coincidence? I don't know. Maybe. Is it a coincidence also that you have the strongest solar cycle since the 1770s with solar cycle 3, exactly during this time frame, and you also have this huge increase in geomagnetic volatility during this time frame? That's not coincidence. The geomagnetic volatility is not, because these nuclear explosions, actually, you can read the research. Go on Google Scholar and type in nuclear explosions, geomagnetic storms, or nuclear testing, geomagnetic storms. You'll read some fascinating papers written back in the 50s and 60s and 70s where they all of a sudden notice aurora on other sides of the planet. Because when you have these nuclear explosions, what happens? It's a few things that happen, okay? So here we see these nuclear explosions. Probably the greatest evil that's ever been released on this planet. You have this element, or basically uranium, but there's other stuff too, which are this fissile material, which is, there's some radioactivity to it, but in general, it is sequestered. The energy is all sequestered in those bonds, and then we break them. That's what creates the energy release. So you have this energy go out. The moment you have that fission reaction occur, it generates a tremendous amount of ions and particles, so electrons, neutrons, alpha particles. It generates a ton of plasma. So you see a huge amount of plasma here, right? This is not like just fire. This is plasma, the fourth state of matter, which we see being resonant with earthquakes and also being a big part of a geomagnetic storm, because the magnetic field fluctuations of the Earth reorganize the plasma of the plastosphere and perhaps even in the surface of the Earth. So you generate a tremendous amount of plasma. All this energy was sequestered in these elements, and now it's suddenly released like that. And we took tremendous amounts of these elements from the Earth, which were sequestered, and released them all in the span of a few decades. Once you create that plasma, where does it go? It doesn't just disappear. Like, this energy doesn't just leave the planet. Some of it does radiate out as long wave radiation, but the Earth is able to maintain a heat balance because it has a bit of a Goldilocks effect. So that energy doesn't go away, not completely. If it did, Earth, even though it's in the Goldilocks zone, would be completely cold, dark, and desolate. It has an ability to keep itself warm, just like you're sleeping at night, you got your blanket over you, you keep yourself warm. Well, when you detonate thousands of nuclear bombs, that energy doesn't just disappear. And plasma is electromagnetic. It is not gravitational. I mean, gravity affects it barely. Electromagnetism is so much stronger. So the moment you create plasma, it is subject to the magnetic field. It will go wherever the magnetic field subjects it to go. So that either causes it maybe to zoom up to the ionosphere and out to the plastosphere and the magnetic field out in space. That's probably where most of it goes. Maybe some of it goes down to the ground. Either way, it's not just sitting there and then slowly deionizing. It's electromagnetic. So it will move to where it's meant to based off the force of electromagnetism, which is so much stronger. Everyone's played with magnets. You can pick up stuff, no problem with gravity, with even just a tiny little magnet. It's crazy. So what they notice is that during these nuclear explosions is that you immediately generate a bunch of neutrons. Neutrons aren't affected by the magnetic field. So they immediately fly out in a straight line in this cloud pattern like this in all directions at almost the speed of light. Neutrons also decay. So what happens is they will then decay, and part of their decay is generating an electron. So now you have electrons. You have this stream of neutrons going out into space, and you have all the while this stream of electrons from the decay of those neutrons being generated. So they immediately also then are subject to the electromagnetic field, because electrons are, part of plasma, right? Plasma is the bigger umbrella term we can use here, but electrons are negatively charged particles, very low mass. So it doesn't take a lot to move them around. They're very fluid and movable, because they have such a low mass, but they have a strong charge. Well, if this neutron or this neutron stream from a nuclear blast goes out far enough to space and then decays into electron, it will be routed by the magnetic field all the way to the other side of the planet, to the magnetically conjugate point. So they did these tests, and there's tons and tons of research on how all of a sudden there were geomagnetic storms and aurora in different parts of the globe. Magnetic field fluctuations, aurora sightings, all this crazy stuff. So you have to think about the energy equation, about just how energy is simply being released, and not all that is just immediately going to radiate out to space, and that sticks with it. And these are the most energetic explosions that you can think of, right? This is not lighting a match, right? We see the effect that all the internal combustion gas engines and all the power plants have done to the Earth in terms of warming it up from liberating the potential energy stored in fossil fuels. The sun's a big driver of the climate, but you can't ignore the fact that we took a whole bunch of sequestered energy in oil and gas and lit a match and lit it up. Like, burn, baby, burn. So not all of that is radiated out with long wave radiation. We see that heat imbalance with satellite data. Well, this is on a whole nother scale of magnitude. These are nuclear explosions. Then you also have these distant geomagnetic effects and more. And you have this resonance that exists between nuclear explosions and also high magnitude earthquakes. They're very similar. That's a whole nother area that you can research into if you want. But they have very similar signatures in terms of their frequency, vibration, energy, all the things. So crazy that we had all these. I mean, look at this. This is the Turk test, 1955, right? And then let's go here and look at this. And well, this is when we had our biggest earthquakes right there. And for these two, as we just thought of in this video, North Korea was doing their underground nuclear tests and bombs right nearby Indonesia and Japan, right? So it's not the other side of the globe, it's right in their neighborhood. Whereas with all these nuclear tests that were occurring, it was global. So you just layer this data together and it starts to look a little bit beyond correlation, because it's the biggest data that we could basically talk about. This isn't Will Smith recitals with earthquake frequency. This is like solar cycles, this is earthquakes, nuclear explosions, geomagnetic storms. Like, this is big, big, big systems. And if they have really strong correlations, That's the foundation for establishing causation between them, or at least strong connections between them. So, have you ever heard of that in school? Maybe not. I mean, maybe you're totally aware of this and you're like, dude, I'm like 2 levels deeper already. Great, make a video, write the article, enlighten us. I'm happy to hear it. There's a lot more that we don't know, of course. But the fact that we are told all these petty lies, I think in many ways is a distraction from one of the greatest deceptions that's ever occurred, which is the fact that these nuclear tests that were done had no effect on the planet. That is probably the greatest lie that has ever been told. These nuclear tests had no impact on the Earth. And unless there were like other civilizations in our past that used nuclear bombs, or there were like space aliens that used nuclear bombs on our planet, then this is the first time in Earth's history, 4.55 billion years, as far as we know at this moment in time, 4.5 billion years, that this sort of process has unfolded on the planet. Again, plasma is electromagnetic, so it doesn't have to stay confined to the Earth. It could go to other places. If the solar wind has a magnetic connection between the sun and the Earth, that plasma from a nuclear blast could feasibly route down to the sun. How does that affect the solar cycles and everything? These are all very good questions to ask, especially when you add in the idea of how the sun is a node in a larger interstellar network being fed by Birkeland currents. You have these internal processes that power the sun. You also have these external currents of energy from interstellar extragalactic sources that perhaps also power the sun. We don't have really any data of that because we need to shoot a satellite over the sun to go through those potential Birkeland currents and measure the current density and magnetic fields to verify. We haven't done that yet. So you can't disprove it. You can't also say it's 100% the case. But yeah, so as we move forward, we have to keep this in mind because this is a geologic input now. This is not a small thing. This is one of the biggest things that Earth has ever experienced. Keep in mind. I mean, short of like an asteroid impact or something, but this is not insignificant. And these effects are likely just beginning now to unfold. I think it's likely that we're going to see an increase in energetic electrification on our planet because of this, because that plasma doesn't just disappear again, right? A lot of it's probably still here on our planet in different places. Maybe it's now been sequestered into the Earth and it's more in the mantle and with the inner core and the outer core. How does that affect the planet? How does that affect earthquakes? How does that affect the magnetic field? Like, these are all open questions, but I don't think that all these thousands of nuclear tests and the energy and plasma and all this stuff generated from that just disappears instantly. I think a lot of it's still here. The Earth is energizing. You add into anthropogenic inputs, you add into that increasing solar activity, and well, Earth is becoming more and more and more of a storm world. So that is something that is a long duration macro view that you can consider an input into your calculus in terms of your life, if you want to. I'm not saying to be afraid of this, but it's good to be aware, it's good to be prepared, and to understand what's actually happening. Because we're seeing crazy weather events. 2025 was one of the biggest years for earthquakes, it was one of the biggest years for tornado activity, and it was one of the biggest years for hurricane activity. Specifically because of Hurricane Melissa. But cyclone activity, tornado activity, earthquake activity, they were nearly all off the charts in 2025. And it was solar maximum, right? And they'll tell you, most people will tell you, there's no connection between them. Okay, well, let's look at 2025. That's the data, folks. So yeah, there's something to it. So with that, let us do a question and answer. And if you have a question, then you can type it in the chat. I will take a few from the chat first, the general chat, and then I will also answer any questions that are attached to a super thanks, super sticker, what have you. So if you really want to make sure your question is answered, then you can do that of any amount and I will get to it. So thank you all for being here and for joining in on the live stream. I've been your host, Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, and we will get started. Chuck in Boston is saying that his father witnessed a test in the 60s, a nuclear test, and he was so spooked, he left the job and it haunted him the rest of his life. Yeah, I'm not surprised. What's the difference between atmospheric nuclear tests and ground nuclear tests? Well, for a ground-based test, or we'll talk about ocean-based tests as well, all the energy is being pumped into the Earth directly. So, again, all that plasma is being created. So where does that go? Well, the deeper you go, the more conductive the Earth is. I don't have a definitive answer for you, but I would imagine that it's going to affect underground systems more than atmospheric systems, where if you're doing a nuclear test in the atmosphere, not going to be good. Starfish Prime, they blasted that in the ionosphere, and that created some serious problems. Like, that was not good. I think that was 1952, but I could be off on the date on that. But and then they've detonated nukes in the ocean. The ocean's very conductive. I mean, regardless, all the sea life that died from that, that's obviously not good. But you're generating plasma no matter what. So that plasma is electromagnetic. Yeah, some of it will deionize, but the energy is neither created nor destroyed. So you had all this sequestered energy, but now it's been liberated. Where is it going? That's the big question. That's really the big question. (175 to 181 nuclear tests at Mururoa Atoll in the Pacific is a huge number. Yes. It's, yeah, every time I do research into this nuclear stuff or focus on it, you can't focus on it every day, but you need to, it's important that we educate on this, but it's always so heavy. It's like the heaviest energies, which is why I think everyone's just wanting to do this with it, because no one wants to address it. But have you seen evidence of nuclear testing in the past 3 months? And is it possible that the anomalous data when everything was wiped a couple months ago may have been because of this? Okay, so I mean, I can't say in the past 3 months, yes or no, but if you wanted to hide a covert nuclear test, what you would do is you would get all set up in a very remote part of the globe. So you need a really good Navy to do this. That's the United States and that's China. Russia's kind of off the list because their Navy is so bound to the North Sea and also to the Black Sea. I mean, yeah, they can move around the international waters, but China and the United States are the two big maritime powers now. You go to a very far off distant location, and you beyond where there's a very low seismic density, seismic network density. Also, these sonograms are just basically devices to listen in on very loud sounds. You go out to the ocean, you put this thing super, super, super deep down, and then you'd wait for a geomagnetic storm, and then you would light the thing because it creates these magnetic fluctuations. But if you already have a geostorm going, then it's going to look like just what's happened normally. So we see during nuclear tests, the ones I've done and the research that we have, that there can be sudden ionospheric disturbances at the sites of nuclear testing. So you want to look for that data. But a lot of these more hard markers of nuclear tests aren't tracked by the international community for covert nuclear testing, because there are groups that say, we're tracking everything, we haven't seen evidence of it. You also get these neutrino pulses. So that is harder to fake. And we have IceCube and we have a few different neutrino detectors out now. But at the same time, we're detecting them so infrequently that I think you're still in the window now of being able to do this. And maybe they're like, oh, is that cosmic? Or we don't really know. So in the past 3 months, I can't say, but that's how you kind of disguise it. You need to go far away from the seismic networks and from these sonic listening networks, and then you want to detonate it during a geomagnetic storm. The stronger, the better. And then you can do your testing. Because they're testing components to make sure it works. Maybe they're doing some scientific analysis as well, but if your last test was in 1990 and now it's 2026, it's been 36 years. You think a virtual test is actually going to tell you whether the thing's going to work or not? I don't know. I think you're going to do covert testing, but who's to say? I'll take one more from the chat, and then we'll go into the super thanks. And yeah, they're also talking about resuming nuclear testing. So if you want to learn more about this from an interesting angle, you can tap into World Astrology Report by Dan Waits, because the sextile between Neptune and Pluto that's active right now through 2032 was also active back at the turn of the 19th century, and also, well, that was a conjunction, but also during this period of nuclear testing from 1950 to 1990. And you had the birth of the physics and understanding of nuclear technology back with the conjunction of Pluto and Neptune. I believe it's 1892, 1893, around there. Then you had this big explosion of nuclear testing, 1950 through 1990, and now we're getting back that final pass of the sextile between Neptune and Pluto, 2026 through 2032. So it's not a surprise based off of that we're seeing this resumption of interest in nuclear technology and maybe even testing or use of the weapons. I'm not going to be surprised if I get to 2032 if they do get used again. I hope not, but I wouldn't be surprised. So you can check out his channel to learn more about that. He goes really in depth, fantastic research and more. And because we can, thank you for gifting the memberships. Thank you so much. Highland Space Weather Club. Did you hear about the Nova Crucis on the 30th of November? It's on Dr. John Search X. I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'll type in Dr. John Nova Crucis. Sounds like some... Oh, was this a... Oh, it was a nova that was discovered. Okay, this is cool. The Nova Crucis was a nova discovered on 29th of November. And Crux is the smallest of 88 constellations, the constellation of Crux. Only 3 previous nova eruptions from there, and this appeared from there. So Nova Crucis 2025, the final Milky Way nova discovery of 2025. Pretty cool. Thanks for highlighting that. That's much bigger than a nuclear explosion. John, thank you for the super sticker. Artemisia, what effect would an impact like that on Mercury have on our planet? I'm not sure what you're referencing. This is pretty early on in the video when you mentioned this. What effect would an impact like that? I think solar storm impact. Maybe that's what you're asking. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referencing though. Saint Onion, thank you so much for the super thanks. Awareness is everything. Knowledge is priceless, and your time is appreciated. You're pretty good. Well, thank you so much, Sir Onion, the Onion Knight, once again with another very generous super thanks. Much appreciated. Happy New Year's, everyone. Thank you all for being here, for supporting the channel. Ami, thank you for the super sticker. That's very generous and kind of you. That's very appreciated. And 270 West with a sequence of super stickers. Thank you so much for those. John saying that my skin looks flawless. What's my diet? I just eat foods that are good, whole and processed for the most part. And you want to stick away from the ones that cause you inflammation. Like just because it may be good for someone else, let's say carrots, doesn't mean that carrots are good for you. So you want to make sure you eat a diet that doesn't inflame you. But I mean, I have more work to do. But yeah, diet is key, and you already tapped into that, so that's great. So that's an interesting statement there. I'm not going to read it, but there you can see it. Thank you, Music Toms, for the super thanks. Silver, planets, any correlation? Joseph, I did an entire video on that, so check out my prior live streams. You'll see that video on the astrology of silver. It's quite wild. And read the pinned comment, because I add even more detail in that pinned comment to the video. Truffles, King Kai, is Elon's plan to move elites to Mars and to nuke us? I hope not. That wouldn't really make any sense, because any colony on Mars is going to be pretty dependent on the Earth, at least for at least a few hundred years. So that kind of be dumb. I don't think Elon would do that. Elon's kind of wild, but I feel like he's a little bit more genuine than some of these other people. But you know, you just take what you can get, basically. But no, hopefully not. Thank you for the super thanks. And Quiva, what are your thoughts on galactic waves in relation to the events that happen on Earth every 12,000 or so years? Do you think things like 3i Atlas roll in on a wave crest? Okay, so there's not really a 12,000 year cycle. If you look at the data, there are some data points for things that happen. For example, the Lechamp excursion, a geomagnetic excursion that was nearly reversal. You have other events. I mean, you can go back in time. But this 12,000 year hypothesis has been pushed forward by a few people. I mean, a whole bunch of people. But some of those 12,000 year markers are very weak in terms of their evidence. But they've pumped them up just by talking about them a lot to make them seem really good in order to say, hey, we got a definitive 12,000 year cycle here. A good example is like the Gothenburg excursion. Well, not much data for that. It's like super limited just out of China, basically. And maybe you have like a little bit more from nearby in Russia now, but you don't have global coverage for the Gothenburg excursion, which is like a key data point for this 12,000 year cycle. As is like the Younger Dryas and Lechamp and all this. So that's not really what it is. There's not a clear 12,000 year cycle, at least based off of my research. Believe what you want, do your own research, I recommend it. But based off my research, when I first learned about this, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I need to learn more about this. I went deep into the research for 2 years and basically came up with different ideas than that. And then galactic waves. We see that in space, we have a structuring to plasma in space, whether this is in our heliosphere, whether this is interstellar space, galactically, but we don't really have a way of measuring galactic waves. And what's the amplitude of these waves? Because we only have 2 probes right now outside the heliosphere. That's Voyager 1, Voyager 2. They're not picking up any galactic waves. In fact, the only things that they've picked up beyond the edge of the heliosphere, besides the normal background vibration of interstellar space, because there's a plasma frequency to it, is these pulses of energy that have traveled from inside the heliosphere out from this extremely large solar explosion. So when there's really big solar flares and coronal mass ejections, those are so strong that you can actually push energy beyond the heliosphere, and Voyager 1 and 2 have picked up a few of those events. And they've been sudden bursts of plasma events. We can also look at our nearby stars and everything, and we can look at energetic neutral gas coming in from interstellar space to have an idea of what exists beyond. But there's really no evidence based on my research for these galactic waves either. So the idea as a whole, cataclysms on Earth and the effect of the interstellar and the galactic environment on our solar system, on the star, on the Earth, there's stuff to that. There's certainly connections across all those. But that hypothesis leads to this like crustal displacement doomsday scenario that people have been making up and saying the world's going to end in 2040. And guess what? When it's 2060 and I'm kicking back, enjoying life, smoking a doobie, I'm going to be laughing, okay? So, yeah, I hope that answers your question. Do things like 3i Atlas roll in on a wave crest? I think there are zones in space, interstellar space, where there's going to be more objects and stuff. We're going to move through it. We're moving into a new bubble plasma soon called the G cloud. When there's different densities to these zones in interstellar space, that can compress or expand the heliosphere. The plasma properties are important on that. I made some videos on that. I'm going to be making more. So it's a huge topic beyond just what I can answer with your question here, but I hope that gives you at least a little bit of a clue, at least as to what I think, based off of my own independent research. that's not trying to pitch you a doomsday scenario. Walter, did you hear about scalar waves and whether they have any relationship with plasma, sunspots, etc.? Okay, so this is another thing that people have taken and then they've basically just made something up kind of from it. You have a magnetic field, let's say. You can measure that in a vector way and you can measure that in a scalar way. So if you measure a magnetic field in a vector way, the vector field will give you not only the force at that location in the field, so like the force potential, it will also give you the direction of that force, the force vector. Whereas a scalar field, and everything is both at the same time, there's always a vector to it and also a non-vector to it. That's the scalar field. The scalar field is just taking the force density calculation, you could say, and ignoring the vector component, which way it's going. So a lot's been said about scalar waves and stuff, and that they're like a whole new different type of electromagnetism or anything. No, it's like every electromagnetic field is vector and scalar. It's just a way of quantifying what you're looking at. If you're interested in the force direction, you look at the vector information. If you're interested just in the potential of the field, then the scalar is fine. So that's what that is. And then, yeah, but if people don't know this, so you can say it sounds cool, you know, scalar field technology and all this stuff, and it just becomes kind of nonsense. So I hope that answers your question. Again, I'm just my own person, n=1, do your own research. Henderson, is there any way I could send you some pics and video I capture while observing through my telescope, supposedly 3i Atlas? Yeah, you can reach out to me on Instagram. That's at Stefan Burns Official, and maybe we can check that out. Thank you for the super thanks. I get tons of people sending me stuff all the time. It's honestly impossible to check it all. So don't expect a response from me. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. Like, there's way too much coming in. I get flooded every single day. So I hope it can work out, but I can't really guarantee anything. And I hope you respect that. Gandhi is asking if Moneypenny was making a reference to the recent oarfish that washed up. Also, is 3i Atlas playing into the planetary alignment? 3i Atlas is playing into the planetary alignment. It will be on the Earth-Jupiter side. And it really goes more exact later in January, which will be interesting. As for the recent oarfish, I wasn't aware of any oarfish that washed up in the past 3 months. A bunch of them washed up back in May and June. It looks like I just typed this in. I don't know if this is true or not, but I guess an oarfish just washed up in Monterey Bay. Oh yeah, here's an SF Gate article. Okay, ooh, baby. It might be time to rock and roll, because let's check this out. Doomsday fish, once in a lifetime sea creature encountered in Monterey Bay, January 2nd, 2026. Now this is interesting because we talked about oarfish back in May and in June, and you know the legend, specifically out of Japan, is that these sort of fish wash up before like big disastrous events, which is why they're called doomsday fish. And we saw a whole bunch of oarfish wash up before the 2011 Great Tohoku earthquake. And then a bunch of oarfish washed up before the magnitude 8.8 earthquake off the coast of Kamchatka. And they washed up in the Pacific and also even in the Indian Ocean. But they washed up New Zealand, Australia. They washed up in India. I think also in Cabo, Mexico, Baja, California. They washed up there. And then we had that magnitude 8.8 megaquake within 2 months. Well, I guess one just washed up off the coast of Monterey. Ted Gouda was scuba diving in Monterey Bay, and on the 30th of December, he saw an oarfish, an undulating thing. Let's see what he says. It was a juvenile king of the salmon, a rare ribbonfish that spends most of its time around 3,000 feet. Very few humans see these unusual and mesmerizing fish alive, but when someone does, it tends to stir up a lot of excitement due to a Japanese legend about ribbonfish sightings portending earthquakes and tsunami, which, well, I just gave you the data for the past two biggest earthquakes that we've had, the 9.1 and the 8.8. And we saw Orphish before both of them. Just check it out, folks. Just do a Google search if you don't believe me, right? It's not hard to do. I also have made videos on this and more. So that's not a good sign. I take these Orphish sightings very seriously because we don't get them that often. And also location is interesting too. So the idea, let me pull up something else to show you as it relates to this, okay? Because I did a post on the Orphish recently on my X account, so I'll bring that up. I'm not sure if that's the one that Moneypenny was talking about, but regardless, it's the one we're talking about now. So let me show you this post on Orphish that I did. Here we go. Remember when 6+ deep-sea doomsday Orphish washed up around the world in May and June of this year, and mainstream scientists are saying they have no relation to earthquakes? And it turns out that on the 29th of July, we had a magnitude 8.8 megaquake, the 6th largest of all time in terms of observational history. I remember. So I take these Orphish sightings very seriously. And here's the thing also. For these scientists to be so immediately dismissive of hundreds of years of Japanese oral history regarding natural occurrences and large earthquakes is disrespectful and disturbing. 100% believe that. So, I mean, I wrote it. So, yeah, this is, and we just had the earthquake off the coast of Mexico. So that could be connected to that. We can't say definitively we got something bigger because that Orphish sighting for Monterey Bay was on the 30th of December and this was on the 2nd of January 2026. So it could be from that. But if we get more of them, then I would really start to look carefully. If we get like 3, 4, 5 more of these Orphish sightings over the next couple of months or next couple of days, then we really need to think seriously about something big coming. So and Artemisia is asking about the solar storm showed earlier to hit Mercury. It's hitting Earth. No, it's hitting us. So I talked about everything that's going to do already. So yeah, it's not hitting Mercury. It's hitting us. Thank you for the super thanks. Karen, thank you as well. Thanks for gifting the memberships. Hill and Karen, thank you for the very generous super thanks. That is much appreciated. God bless. Wishing you all the best in 2026 and everyone here watching as well. Gates 9, is there evidence of nova isotopes with a half-life too short to be another star besides the sun? Like supernova isotopes? That's an interesting question. I don't know. I'll look into that though. But from what I know, everyone is from what I know, I haven't heard anything about that. Like most of the stuff in our solar system has been dated to almost exactly the same age because it was created at the same time, like kind of that supernova reset at the same time. But again, I'm very open to everything, and there's more that we don't know than we do know. So I'll repeat that over and over and over. Dandelion69, thank you for the super thanks. Seems the audio is fine, so I'm not sure what you're talking about, but thank you. Underwater Panther, happy 2026. Notice your HCL holistic knowledgeable as well. So much respect. I want to peep your birth chart. All the love. Thank you very much for the super thanks. HLC, I'm not sure what that means. But you know, acronyms can be crazy. And Quiva is saying, thanks for the info. Was curious ways things could get here to our solar system. Big fan of plasma consciousness, aliens. The sun always has some kind of story playing out in plasma. Yeah. So in that regard, like there are these interstellar currents and filaments and galactic ones as well. But I just don't think the story is as clear cut and as neat as some groups of people may want it to be, based off of extremely limited data. We have like almost no data on this. And to say that we have the extragalactic environment completely figured out after being in the space age since the 70s, basically, like not 60 years now, like basically 60 years. I just think it's really, really like egotistical to think that. I think there's much, much more that we don't know, and we don't have it figured out, and I don't think these things come in perfect, absolute perfect rhythms. I think there obviously are some frequencies and resonances and coherence to things, but there's also a lot of random variability and chaos. So if anyone, and there's a lot of missing data points. So that's why I was like, this is really interesting. I looked into it and there's tons of missing data points, and you expose those and it's a house of cards that falls apart. So that's just what I'm doing. I'm not here making a video every day to like put those people down or that idea down, but when someone asks me, I give you my thoughts. And that's why you're doing the super thanks. So, but that doesn't take away from the fact that, yeah, we should be very aware of our stellar, our solar environment and our interstellar environment, because those things can affect us in very significant ways, even cataclysmically. But hopefully not in our lifetime. Hopefully not in our lifetime. So with that, we are going to sign off because that answers all the questions. That is the end of part 3. So thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate you all being a part of the channel and for joining me in 2026. Excited to see where this goes. I'll keep you up to date with what is happening with the Earth energetically, with our star, the sun, with our interstellar environment, and much more. So please subscribe if you'd like to see that. I release videos almost daily. Smash that thumbs up button. Helps the channel grow. And I will see you all in the next video. If you'd like to look at some of the channel merchandise that I have and some of the holistic wellness tea blends, then you can click this link right there. And if you want to learn more about Earth's magnetic field, then you can click that video box right there and learn much, much more about it. Thanks so much and have a great day.